over Ricardo in that respect. Whereas Ricardo's main concern, second point, whereas Ricardo's main concern with respect to distribution was the class antagonism between capitalists and landlords, Marx shifted the focus to the conflict between the capitalist and the worker. In this, he was certainly influenced by the Ricardian socialists who wrote during the 3 decades after Ricardo's death, and I'm thinking in particular of Hodgkin. Third sense in which Marx advances over Ricardo, the intersectoral analysis of Capital Volume 2, which explicitly models the economy as a self-reproducing system, which machines enter into the production of machines, resurrected the physiocratic idea of the interconnectedness, the layered nature of production. And this insight, which is now commonplace, has enormous practical and analytical implications. It's the basis of modern input-output analysis. It underpins the structural complexities of the price system, which Sraffa drew upon to expose the defects of the orthodox theory of distribution. And also, it's a key element of Kalecki's business cycle model. Fourth advance, Marx's crisis theory and his critique of Say's law anticipated much of Keynes's economics. And in fact, this was the aspect of Marx's work that John Robinson thought was most worth developing in 1942. Marx's analysis of technological unemployment was an important contribution. It is true that technological unemployment drifted off economist radar screens after the Keynesian revolution. The topic is important, and it certainly was widely discussed by German-speaking economists in the first third of the 20th century. Another advance, and I'll just mention this to finish up this part of the piece, is the idea of the financial system as an engine for the concentration of wealth. This was a powerful insight, and we know from the first paper we heard today that it's an issue that remains relevant in the 21st century. None of these contributions, all vitally important, all serious advances over the work of the earlier classical economists, none of these contributions is grounded in, requires, or is even enhanced by Marx's labor value analysis. We can define exploitation in purely technical terms, the ratio of labor time embodied in the social product to the labor time embodied in wage goods, but that conveys no sense of the coercive nature of wage labor, which is surely one of the hallmarks of an exploitative economic system. Moreover, the coercive nature of capitalist production relations can be adequately described without measuring your accounts in units of labor time. It seems to me that what matters are the power imbalances that stem from workers' alienation from the means of production. And we can talk about these clearly enough without adopting Marx's labor value analysis. The existence of any non-productive class means that some members of society are toiling for the benefit of others, because otherwise the non-productive class would cease to exist. You don't need to measure the economy accounts in terms of labor time to figure this out. What quantitative significance is there to the ratio of surplus labor to the labor embodied in the wage bundle? What do we learn from knowing the rate of exploitation that we can't figure out from the simple fact that capitalists, because they own the means of production, can dictate the conditions of employment and can skim off part of the value produced by workers? The word exploitation certainly conveys something substantive about the power imbalances that define our economic system. And in that sense, I think the word is useful. but it's also highly ideologically charged. And that ideologically charged character of the word constitutes a barrier to discussion with people who aren't yet and who may never be persuaded of the fundamentally predatory nature of capitalism. But if we want to have an impact on those people, we have to engage with them. So using the word exploitation is not helpful to that. Let me say a few words about efforts to rescue the value analysis of Marx. This emotional pull of the labor theory of value is present in various attempts to rescue the theory from the critiques that have been leveled against it. Now, I don't want to enter into a detailed discussion of these efforts, but I would briefly mention the new solution put forward by Duncan Foley and Gerard Dumenil and David Levy, which purports to validate Marx's value analysis, and in particular purports to rehabilitate his solution to the transformation problem. I would argue that it doesn't really do that. It replaces Marx's value magnitudes, quantities of labor time, with somewhat different categories, which are expressed as quantities of monetary value. And then it assigns Marx's labels to those monetary categories, which aren't really the ones that Marx used. As Lippius notes, in that system, in the new solution, the rate of exploitation and variable capital do not have the same meaning or the same quantitative measure as they do in Marx's system. In the end, the standard criticisms of the transformation algorithm and the labor theory of value aren't eliminated by the new solution. They are merely camouflaged. I would also add that these rescue efforts have the defect of being analytically cumbersome as compared to Marx's labor value analysis. Marx wanted his critique of capitalism to be accessible to working class readers, and his labor value analysis, whatever its flaws, is readily understandable and easily conveys the sound intuition that underlies Marx's theory of distribution. New solution reformulations require considerable effort from readers who are not professionally trained economists. And to me, this seems, although not in itself a reason to reject it, it seems to me that these solutions are in this respect not in the spirit of Marx. I will head towards my conclusion with some broad remarks on Sraffa's attitude towards Marx, a topic which has been addressed by others in considerable detail, and this topic on which consensus remains elusive. There can be no doubt that Sraffa's reading of Marx helped him to organize and clarify his thinking on the issues with which he was concerned in production of commodities. Sraffa came to Ricardo via his critique of Marshall, when sometime in 1927 he recognized that the classical theory was not an embryonic version of the marginalist theory with an underdeveloped demand side, but recognized that the classical theory was an altogether different analytical framework. No doubt, Sraffa saw right away that Marx was working within this same tradition. We know that Sraffa had read Marx by the time he embarked upon the research that would lead to production of commodities. In a manuscript fragment entitled Metaphysics, dated 1928, Sraffa speculated about the direction the project would take, and now I'm quoting from him. I foresee that the ultimate result will be a restatement of Marx by substituting his Hegelian metaphysics and terminology, our own modern metaphysics and terminology. By metaphysics, here I mean, I suppose, the emotions that are associated with our terminology and frames, our mental schemes. That is, what is absolutely necessary to make the theory living, capable of assimilation, and at all intelligible.